Okay, next group up, remember your sight picture?
50 meters, 5 rounds, and she can't even hit the target. Laughter erupted from the combat trainees at Fort Ridgeline's wind-whipped firing range. Then Chief Range Officer Cole Warren's voice cut through the noise. Check the back wall. And just like that, silence. Fort Ridgeline, Colorado, a high-altitude training post where the wind never stops testing your stance, and reputations can be built or buried in a single exercise. Morgan Hayes stepped onto the line, average height. Lean build, combat boots that looked barely broken in. Her 8 months here had been spent in the logistics and armaments section moving ammo crates, cleaning rifles, signing off inventory sheets. To the combat side of the house, she was the ammo clerk, someone who probably thought marksmanship meant making a neat handwriting entry on a maintenance log. Captain David Rourke, the range officer in charge, folded his arms and let his voice carry over the wind. 5 rounds, logistics. Let's see if you can even hit paper. From the benches, a private muttered. $20 says she drops the rifle before she fires. His buddy snorted. Nah, I say she's gonna shoot the wrong lane. They laughed, confident, relaxed, because to them, this wasn't training. It was theater. Morgan didn't rise to the bait. She simply stepped into position, checked the weapon with mechanical precision, loaded a magazine, and settled into what looked like a functional, if unremarkable, firing stance. The setup. The wind was gusting from the left, sharp enough to throw a round off by inches at this distance. The paper target 3 feet by 4 feet, 50 meters down range, swayed slightly on its frame. Rourke's tone was pure condescension. Whenever you're ready. Logistics. Try not to embarrass yourself too much. Morgan's breathing was steady, her grip secure but not textbook. She took her time, the muzzle barely shifting. First shot. Through binoculars. The paper target stayed perfectly clean. No hole, no mark, no nothing. The laughter hit instantly. Louder now, feeding on itself. She missed the whole damn thing and trainees shouted. Maybe she's aiming at the next county. Another chimed in. Warren, standing behind Rourke, lowered his own scope and frowned. He didn't join in the laughter. Second shot. Again. Nothing visible on the target. More jeers, louder still. A few logistics personnel watching from the back minced. Third shot. Fourth. Fifth. By now. Even some of the support staff were shaking their heads. A clean sweep of misses. Textbook humiliation for the ammo clerk. Morgan safed the weapon, set it down, and stepped back from the firing line. Her expression never changed, no frustration, no embarrassment, just neutral. The shift Rourke smirked at the crowd. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we don't send support personnel into the fight. Some of the combat trainees were already turning away, ready to pack up gear, make weekend plans, or check their phones. That's when Warren moved without a word. He walked past the shooting benches, past the target frames, right up to the concrete backstop wall at the end of the range. He crouched, ran a gloved finger over something, then stood up slowly, from 50 meters away. His voice carried just enough to reach Rourke. "Captain, you might want to see this." Rourke, looking annoyed, trudged forward, behind them. The trainees noticed the change in tone and began drifting after, curiosity replacing cockiness. And there, embedded in the concrete at chest height, were 5 perfect bullet holes, not scattered, not sloppy, tight enough that a quarter would have covered them all. Warren turned to the group, his eyes narrowing. Those rounds didn't miss. They went exactly where she put them. The wind whipped across the range again, but this time no one laughed. For a moment, nobody moved. The sound of the wind against the steel range canopy seemed louder than the crowd behind the line. Captain Rourke crouched beside the backstop wall, his hand hovering over the cluster of impacts. 5 perfect rounds. Not one pulled high, not one low. Every single shot dead center in an imaginary chest, a chest that would have been standing just behind the untouched paper target. He followed the line back toward the firing position, tracing it with a finger as if his brain couldn't quite process what his eyes already knew. The gap between the edge of the paper and the wooden frame was less than 1/10 of an inch. "How the hell?" he muttered under his breath. Chief Warren's voice was low, even, but it carried the weight of experience. That kind of grouping isn't luck. Captain, it's math, muscle memory, and a level of control most shooters will never touch. A private who'd been laughing the loudest earlier now whispered, "No way. You can't thread bullets through a gap that small at 50 meters. It's not possible." Warren shot him a glance that shut him up instantly. Possible? Sure, but the number of people on the planet who can do it. You could count them on one hand and have fingers left over. From the firing line. Morgan Hayes hadn't moved. Her hands rested loosely at her sides, her eyes fixed somewhere far beyond the range. She could feel the shift in the air the way the laughter had collapsed into something else. Wariness, confusion, a creeping kind of respect that none of them wanted to admit out loud. Rourke straightened slowly, his earlier smirk gone. "Hayes," he called. "Where did you learn to shoot?" Like he never finished the question. The sound of approaching boots cut him off heavy, deliberate, the kind of stride that carried authority without a single wasted step. A man in a weather-faded combat jacket emerged from the access road, moving straight through the group like they weren't even there. No rank insignia, no unit patch, just the sharp eyes of someone who had spent too many years making decisions in places no one would ever read about. "Major Grant Maddox," Warren said quietly, almost to himself. Rourke frowned. "You know him only by reputation," Warren replied. "And if he's here, this isn't just about training scores." Maddox stopped at the firing line. His gaze went from the untouched paper target to the concrete wall to Morgan. Something passed across his face. Not surprise. Exactly. Recognition. "Clear the range," he said. "Major." "This is my," Rourke began, but Maddox cut him off with a look that could have frozen steel. "Clear it. Now." The trainees hesitated, caught between confusion and curiosity. Maddox didn't repeat himself. He didn't have to. Warren started moving them out with clipped commands, breaking up the knots of conversation, ushering them back toward the barracks. Within minutes, the wind was the only thing left on the range and 3 people. Maddox stepped closer to Morgan. 8 years, he said quietly. 8 years we've been looking for you. She tilted her head slightly, her voice calm. "I wasn't hiding." "The hell you weren't," Maddox said, gesturing toward the bullet holes in the wall. Phantom Lance doesn't just vanish from the most classified program in SOCOM history and end up logging ammunition at a training post in Colorado. The name hung in the cold air like a challenge. Phantom Lance, a sniper whose shots had passed into rumor, then into legend. Stories told in quiet corners of forward operating bases, the shooter who could thread a round through a helicopter's side window at speed, or take 3 targets with a single bullet at over a kilometer. Morgan's expression didn't change. "Legends have a way of getting people killed," she said. Maddox studied her for a long moment. "The last anyone heard, you were KIA in a black zone op on the Middle Eastern frontier. Entire team wiped out. No survivors, no recoverable intel." "There were survivors," Morgan said, her voice just above the wind. "Just not the ones your people counted." "What happened out there?" "What happened," she said, "is I learned the difference between serving my country and serving the people who give the orders. Some missions aren't about protecting lives. They're about protecting careers." Maddox didn't argue. He didn't have to. The look in her eyes told him this was a dead end for now. "Whatever your reasons," he said finally, "the skill that put those holes in that wall doesn't belong behind a desk." Morgan glanced past him at the concrete, at the perfect circle of impacts. "Skills are tools, Major. You don't hand them to people you don't trust." Then she walked past him, toward the armory building, her boots crunching on the gravel. Maddox turned to watch her go, the wind tugging at his jacket, his mind already racing ahead. Because if Phantom Lance was here, it meant the quiet part of the war was about to get loud again. The armory door was halfway closed when Maddox caught up. "Morgan." She stopped, hand on the frame, but didn't turn around. "You still using that name?" he asked. She glanced over her shoulder, just enough for him to see the faintest curve of a smile. "It works here." Maddox stepped inside. The smell of oil and solvent thick in the air. Racks of M4 carbines lined the walls, each tagged and numbered. Morgan was already at a bench, stripping down a rifle with the easy precision of someone who didn't have to think about the sequence. "You're not here by accident," he said. "You picked this post for a reason." She didn't answer immediately. Metal clicked on wood as she laid the bolt carrier aside. High elevation, strong winds, good armory access, and nobody here asks too many questions about a logistics specialist who minds her own business. Maddox's eyes flicked to her hands, steady, deliberate, not a tremor, not a wasted motion. "You could be back in the field tomorrow," he said. "We've got targets that require exactly what you can do. That's the problem." "Major," she replied, looking up at him now, "you don't care what I will do, only what I can do." For a moment, the only sound was the quiet click of parts being reassembled. Maddox leaned against the workbench, lowering his voice. 8 years ago, Operation Iron Dagger, border region between Syria and Iraq. The mission went sideways, intel compromise, whole team eliminated, you disappeared. Morgan's gaze didn't waver. "I didn't disappear, I walked away. People don't just walk away from Tier 1 programs. They do when they figure out the mission was never about saving lives. It was about erasing evidence and the people who had it." Maddox said nothing, but his jaw tightened. He'd heard rumors about that op, quiet whispers, never in official channels. She set the rifle down and reached for a cloth, wiping her hands. "So now you're here to drag me back. I'm here because the world's changing again," he said. "And people like you, the ones who can do the impossible, are disappearing. When the call comes, we won't have enough left to answer it." Morgan gave a small shake of her head. "The call always comes. The difference is whether you pick it up." Maddox stepped closer, his voice dropping even further. "We've got chatter about an operation in the works. Something that smells like Iron Dagger all over again. And if I'm right, the people behind it will make what happened 8 years ago look like a warm-up." Her eyes narrowed. "And you think telling me that will make me jump back in? I think you never stopped caring." Maddox said, "You've just been waiting for a reason you can live with." Morgan leaned back against the bench, crossing her arms. "You're assuming the people you work for and the people I'm willing to protect are the same. That's where you're wrong." He said, "I'm not here for them. I'm here for what happens if you keep pretending you're just the ammo clerk while the wrong people put plans in motion." Outside, the wind rattled the corrugated roof, the kind of sound that made you aware of every open space, every unseen angle. Morgan looked past him toward the open door. "This post works for me because it's quiet, and I'd like to keep it that way." Maddox followed her gaze. "Quiet's an illusion." "Hayes, you know that better than anyone." She gave a faint laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Then let me enjoy the illusion a little longer." He hesitated, then reached into his jacket and slid a small envelope onto the bench. "Coordinates, if you change your mind." She didn't touch it, not while he was watching. Maddox lingered a second longer, then turned to leave. At the door, he stopped. "One more thing, that shooting on the range today. You made a statement, whether you meant to or not, and the kind of people who pay attention to that statement, they're already looking for you." When he was gone, Morgan waited until the sound of his boots had faded completely. Then she opened the envelope. A single set of GPS coordinates, written in block letters. She recognized them instantly. The place where Phantom Lance had been born, and the place where, if Maddox was right, she might have to decide who she still was. She slid the paper into her pocket, then glanced toward the back wall of the armory, already picturing those 5 perfect bullet holes in concrete. Officially, nothing had happened. The range report logged a standard marksmanship evaluation with routine results. No mention of impossible groupings, legendary snipers, or quiet conversations with men who didn't wear insignia. But, unofficially, Fort Ridgeline had changed overnight. The combat trainees who'd laughed loudest now avoided making eye contact with Morgan Hayes. They didn't mock the logistics section anymore. They didn't make casual jokes about ammo clerks or desk soldiers. Not after watching 5 rounds carve a perfect quarter-sized hole in a concrete wall 50 meters away. Private Dawson, the one who had bet she'd drop the rifle, now stopped talking altogether when she walked into the mess hall. Corporal Kincaid, who'd once claimed support personnel were dead weight in the field, started nodding to her in passing. Rumors spread the way they always do in a closed installation, fast, quiet, and never in writing. Some said she'd been part of a black book sniper program no one would admit existed. Others swore she'd been KIA and somehow walked back into the world. A few whispered the name Phantom Lance like it was a ghost story, the kind you didn't tell unless you were sure no one outside your circle was listening. Morgan ignored it all. She arrived at the armory exactly on time. She completed her inventories, logged the weapon maintenance, and spoke only when required. But small changes began to surface. 3 nights after the incident, Sergeant Ibarra, a promising but inconsistent shooter, found an unmarked envelope under his barracks door. Inside a single sheet of paper covered in handwritten notes. Adjust grip pressure, brake trigger straight back, not down and left. Learn your rifle's cold bore behavior. No signature, no explanation. 2 days later, Ibarra's grouping improved by 30%. The next week, a different trainee, Corporal Finch, found a similar envelope. This one included sketches of wind drift calculations and tips on using natural cover. By the end of the month, 5 different trainees had received them. None of them spoke about it openly, but each one quietly knew where the notes came from. Chief Warren also noticed. He began requesting Morgan's help on armory inspections, which somehow always happened when a batch of instructors were preparing advanced marksmanship drills. She'd move between workbenches, checking rifles, making small adjustments no one asked for, and somehow, the shooters assigned to those rifles started posting better scores. When Rourke confronted Warren about it, the chief just shrugged. If the rifles are maintained better, everyone benefits. Logistics is doing its job. Rourke didn't push it, not since Maddox's visit. Late one evening, Morgan was alone in the armory when she heard footsteps in the hall. Warren stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You've been busy," he said. "Just doing my job," she replied, not looking up from the rifle she was cleaning. He studied her for a long moment. "You know those kids would follow you into a fight now. That's not my job," she said evenly. "Maybe not, but they're learning things they'll carry into fights whether you go with them or not." Morgan paused, meeting his eyes. "Good. Then I don't have to be there." 2 more weeks passed. The base felt sharper. Shooting scores climbed. Tactical drills ran smoother. There was less chest-thumping bravado and more quiet competence. Maddox returned twice, never approaching her directly. He'd watch from a distance, making calls on a phone that didn't match any standard-issue model. Morgan pretended not to notice, but the envelope he'd left in her bench drawer, the one with the coordinates, stayed in her locker. She told herself she'd thrown it away. She hadn't. One afternoon, as she locked up the armory, Finch intercepted her. "Ma'am, Hayes, just wanted to say thanks for, you know." She didn't answer, just gave a small nod and kept walking behind her. Finch exhaled like someone who'd just gotten away with breaking a rule. That night, Morgan sat alone on her bunk, the sound of wind battering the windows. She pulled the envelope from her locker, turning it over in her hands. If Maddox was right, Those coordinates marked the place where her old life had ended, and maybe where something much worse was beginning. She slid the envelope back into the locker and shut the door. For now, she told herself, she was still just the ammo clerk, but somewhere deep down, she knew the quiet wouldn't last. The call came on a Tuesday night. Morgan was alone in the armory, logging out her final weapon check, when the phone on the wall, the one nobody ever used, rang once, twice. She picked it up, a man's voice, low and clipped. It started. No name, no explanation, just the sound of the line going dead. She stood there for a long moment, the hum of the fluorescent light loud in her ears. Then she opened her locker, took out the envelope Maddox had left, and stared at the coordinates inside. By morning, Fort Ridgeline was moving like a hornet's nest someone had kicked, quietly, without announcements or alarm bells. Certain instructors and trainees were gone, their bunks empty, their names missing from the day's roster. Chief Warren found her cleaning a sidearm at the workbench. "You're leaving," he said. "Not a question. I'm just going to check something," she replied. He nodded once, like he'd been expecting it. "Then take this." He slid a small wooden plaque across the bench. The words were laser engraved, clean and simple. "Always check what's behind your target." The coordinates led to an old training facility in the mountains, a place she hadn't seen in 8 years. Snow crunched under her boots as she approached the long-abandoned range house, its windows dark, its flagpole bare. Inside, a single shooting lane was lit. Maddox stood at the far end, a rifle slung across his back. "Thought you'd show." He said, "I came to see for myself," she answered. He gestured to the paper target at the end of the lane. "This is where it's going to happen. They'll run an exercise here next week. Half the shooters won't even know they're working for the wrong side." Morgan's jaw tightened. "And you want me to stop it?" "I want you to make sure the right people walk out alive," Maddox said. Nothing more. She stepped into the lane, checking the wind flags outside the window. The air was still, the silence heavy. "Why me?" she asked, loading a magazine. "Because you can do what no one else here can," Maddox said. "And because they still don't see you coming." Morgan chambered around, her hands steady. "That's the way I like it." When the exercise came, it lasted just 11 minutes. From her hidden position in the shadows of the range house loft, Morgan watched as the operation unfolded exactly as Maddox had described, except for one detail: she was there. 5 shots, each one surgical, each one removing a threat no one else in the room had even realized was a threat. By the time the smoke cleared, the trainees were still breathing. The wrong players weren't. No one saw her leave. Back at Fort Ridgeline, life resumed as if nothing had happened. Morgan returned to the armory, logged the day's rifles, and swept the floor. The trainees nodded respectfully when she passed, but said nothing. The plaque from Warren hung above her bench now, the words catching the light. "Always check what's behind your target." Some nights, she'd sit in the quiet and think about the shots she'd taken, the ones that made it into rumor, and the ones that never would. She didn't need applause. She didn't need anyone to know her name, because the truth about mastery is simple. It doesn't need an audience. And if anyone at Fort Ridgeline ever forgot that, they only had to remember the day an ammo clerk put 5 perfect rounds into a concrete wall without touching the target in front of it. The kind of shot you don't forget, the kind of lesson you never see coming.